Hey everybody, I'm Greg Sowell, and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I talk to interesting people and try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go around is Pop Haydn. He grew up in rural Tennessee as a minister's son, and in fact, he almost became one himself until he thought, I'll become a magician instead. He's been all over the world. He's met his heroes. He's been a big part of the Magic Castle. For those of you that know it, it's a pretty big deal. And by all accounts, he's been very accomplished. And yet, even at 72, he's still learning new things. He's still pushing himself. Pop's audio is a little rough here and there, but I think his stories well make up for it. So I hope you enjoy this chat with Pop. Well, Pop Haydn, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast.
My pleasure. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Well, for not just for you, but for the listener, I'm a little under the weather at the moment. So please forgive any sniffles or sneezes. I'm going to try and edit those out. I'll see if I can hit the mute button quick enough. Maybe maybe you'll get lucky in this. So normally in this podcast, I like to say that you and I are in line somewhere. I don't know where we'd be in line at. Say we're at the grocery store. Self-checkout's down right now, so we're all standing in line. We're just picking up a few things, and we happen to be chatting. And I tell you that I'm a car stereo installer. That's my 9 to 5. I love it. We talked about that for a second. Now it's your turn to reciprocate. So, Pop, who are you?
Well, I'm an entertainer. I'm a magician.
So that's the very first thing you think of yourself as an entertainer first.
Well, if somebody thinks of himself as their job, that's what I thought you meant.
Yeah. What are you? Who are you? Tell me about yourself.
I've been a magician all my life. That's all I do.
A magician all your life. Well, I mean, that's not all you do, right? I mean, you've done a lot of different things growing up, right? So take me back. So what, it seems like every sort of person that's kind of in a very specific industry and like entertainer wise, it seems like there's like this watershed moment, this turning point where they thought, you know what, this is something I want to do. This is something I love. So was there one of those for you?
Yes, it was when I was 10. I decided to become a professional magician when I was about 10.
Did you find it or did it find you?
Well, it started out, my father was an Episcopal minister, and he had a missionary come and his wife come stay with us when I was about 6. And he was dressed up to go to the church event in a gaucho outfit to talk about his ministry and what it's like down in Argentina. And so he put on his mustache with his spirit gum, and I was really fascinated with that. And he said, I'll show you something. He put spirit gum on his fingers and waved them around him until they dried. And then he went like this and produced a little puff of smoke. And then another one. And he could, every time he'd open his hand, a little, like cigarette smoke would float up into the air. And what it was just the gum making a tiny filament. And that filament would float. It was so light. And it looked just like smoke, and they'd float off. And he showed me how to do it. And he gave me some spirit gum. So that was my first magic trick. I thought, smoke.
Oh my gosh. So you were a little kid growing up in Tennessee, right? And I'm assuming, so I did a little digging. You actually have a Wikipedia article, which is on my bucket list. Somehow I got to find myself on there. But obviously somebody with an amazing background like yourself doesn't surprise me that you'd be there. But in there, it said at about 10 years old, you were at a retreat or a summer camp or something to that effect?
And that was a little bit later. The earlier thing was when I was 6. Mm-hmm. When I was 9 or 10, I went to a summer camp up in near Asheville in the Smoky Mountains. And Methodist minister there was doing a magic show for all the kids, and that's the thing that really got me hooked on magic. That's when I decided to become a magician. he was doing the standard stuff, linking rings and other kinds of things, and they were all great and fun. But then he did this thing called a bang on, and what it is, a cardboard cone. It's a pink cone with a little kangaroo on the side of it. It's called a bang on, and it was like a pop gun, a little paper pop gun. When you go real fast with it, a little piece of paper pops out and makes a bang. So he took a silk scarf and put it in the cone, and then took a magic wand and stuffed it on down in there, and then he, bam, made it pop, and he opened it up, and the scarf was gone. Well, all the kids were yelling, "It's in the wand! It's in the wand!" And he, "What? You think it's in here?" And they said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And he broke it in half and threw the pieces into the audience. Well, to me, I would have given my eye teeth just to have a magic wand, to play with, a toy. He broke it just to prove they were wrong. That kind of stuck in my head really big. And that night I sat up all night long thinking about how it could have been done and why it was so important to him, to prove that they were wrong. And what would it be like if you could do real magic? And what would it mean if you could? And how do you think those rings work? Do they have magnets in them? Or so my brain is just totally absorbed for the first time probably in pure creative thinking, inductive reasoning. You have to invent the trick. You can't figure it out from what you have. Magic shuts down the deductive brain. There's no deductive solution because you're given the wrong facts. It's like you have a premise and another premise and another premise, and they equal a conclusion. It's a valid argument, but one of the premises isn't true. He didn't really put his coin in his hand. You believe something that's not true. Therefore, when you go back over all the premises, they all make sense. They're all true. The argument's valid. The conclusion has to be magic or the impossible. And yet it's not. So you're confused constantly because you can't figure out what you missed. You have to invent. If I wanted to make somebody think I did this, how would I go about it? How would I invent the trick? And that's the difference. You have to invent the trick in order to find a solution for it. And that forces you into inductive reasoning, into what if he had magnets? What if, magic is real? What if all these kinds of things? So that was my experience of my first magic show. It kept me awake all night thinking. And the next morning I was exhausted, but just felt better than I ever had in my life. My brain had been supercharged for something new.
That's cool. Do you still find yourself having that feeling occasionally when you see somebody do something that just defies logic?
No.
The magic's gone.
Well, the thing is, see, the first time you see a miracle like magic, you're totally nonplussed. It shakes your reality. It shakes your belief in everything you know. The second time, eventually what happens is you either find a solution to the trick or you just put it on a shelf somewhere and only comes up when somebody mentions magic. Go, "Oh yeah, well I saw this guy and he did this." And they're still looking for a solution. They want you to be as amazed as they are. And if you're not, they want the solution. But you put that on the shelf and it's constantly like a burr under the saddle, of the mind. And then you get another one. You see another trick that fools you just as much. And then it's like two of them over there. Once you have 3 or 4, pretty bumps becomes a drawer for things that you don't understand. And they don't bother you so much. Which I think is a very good attitude toward life. There's a lot of things you just don't need to understand. People go crazy if they can't understand. Some people's reaction to magic is very fierce. They hate it because they can't stand not being in control, not understanding everything.
So I've occasionally I'll challenge myself to try and learn something new. I don't know. I figure out something to some level of competency, and then I get bored and then move on. But I don't know, it was a little while back. I decided I wanted to learn a little bit of sleight of hand. And so, I learned to do a few card tricks. And whenever I'd see like the videos on YouTube, I mean, that's what taught me how to do everything. It's a pretty amazing place. And ultimately, that's where I found you. But I remember seeing some of those tricks for the first time, or the sleights, or whatever you want to call them, and just being so amazed. And then, once you see behind the curtain, a little bit of that magic's gone. But I remember going to my in-laws, and I was doing a couple of the sleights, and the reaction from my mother-in-law was weird. She was very stoic, very quiet, and it aggravated her. It downright made her mad, because here I am tricking her. And I was thinking, well, it's like, that's such a interesting reaction. And I was like, one, it has nothing to do with me. That's all about the person. But I was thinking, why is it that if I can watch this stuff, somebody can do an illusion for me or a trick, and I don't get mad? Why is that? I was thinking, it's like whenever I'm going to see a magician, I'm buying a ticket. I'm on board. I understand. You're gonna lie to me. You're gonna trick me. You're gonna use misdirection. But you're here for my amusement, my entertainment, and I think it's like, for me, it's definitely the suspension of disbelief going into it.
Well, I don't see. I think there's some suspension of disbelief, but here's the way I look at it. When I'm fooled by a magic trick, I don't think there's no possible way. That's what a normal spectator will think when he's confronted with it. Because a magic trick is a con game. And it's a con game that's played against the spectator in a way. You're trying to convince him something isn't true. But in order to make that pleasant, you have to take him on a journey that ends him up in a good place, where he's not feeling like an idiot.
Yeah.
And so that's where the suspension of disbelief comes in. The character I play, Pop Haydn, is a fantasy character. And he's obviously a fantasy character, even though I don't explain who he is or why he's there. He just comes. I know why he's there and who he is. To me, he was a con man, a shell game operator from the 1890s who became a medicine show performer and had his own medicine show and his own medicine company. And he was involved in bringing electricity to California, not using Edison's patents, using Tesla's ideas without wires. And he built a tower near Landers out in the desert of California to bring electricity to this little town of Whitehorse Ranch. And there was some kind of feedback loop or something, and not entirely his fault. Had something to do with Tesla's calculations and so forth. But eventually they found out that the whole town had been transported to the 21st century. So you got the local farrier, blacksmith and gun salesman and market and cowboys and this little medicine troupe, all brought into the desert here in the 21st century. They have to make a living. So that's the story. And so he's doing magic. He came into LA from the desert and started doing magic. He's trying to get a show together so he can sell the medicine again. And he finds out that people here will pay $4 for a bottle of water. So he feels home now.
Wait, what is it about that aesthetic, that style, that kind of steampunk-ish world that draws you in? I mean, because you just invented a whole backstory to support this person. So I'm just curious, like, what is it that pulls you in about that?
Well, the story is fascinating, and it's got to be a good story. It's basically the Wizard of Oz. The 21st century people are the Munchkins. It's so easy to make a living here, he's thinking of running for president. But he's obviously hampered by the fact that he has no ID. He can't afford to get arrested because his birth certificate is from 1849. Nobody's going to buy that. So he's in a quandary. He has to follow all the laws and be very careful not to cross any lines or be in any trouble and stuff. And in the process, he's trying to take people out all their money that he can.
So I've seen several of your productions on YouTube, like of various pieces. Like you've got some longer ones, you've got some shorter ones in there, and I've noticed it feels like you're about 70% story and about 30% magic. And I think that's probably what draws me to you more than just about anybody else. Is I love a storyteller. I love a good story, and not only that, but you pull me in with your expressions, your wit, just everything so carefully produced and nuanced. And I've noticed, you always have to be ready for improvisation, right? Because you never know what the crowd's going to say, what they're going to do, and I've never seen you miss a beat. And it's almost like you really are Pop Haydn. Like it's almost like you embody that so well.
The idea to me was I became Pop in 2005, right? So that was a change from the persona I had done before, who didn't have a Southern accent and was, three-piece suit type, clean-shaven magician, But in 2005, I decided I wanted to do something different. I wanted to create a fantasy character, like somebody you would see in the movie, as if you just walked out of that movie and offered to play a game of three-card monte or a shell game with you. What would it be like? How would you react? And I don't like telling stories too much. I mean, I do occasionally tell a little bit of a story, but most of the story is in the background. I hint at it, or it's there, but it's not. I don't walk on stage saying I'm from 1849, or 1910 or whatever. I just come on stage and I'm a magician, And except in my head, if I'm hired to do a fancy party in Bel Air, I open the door, and go in, and I am Pop Haydn from 1910, who's been here in the 21st century now for 15 or 16 years. So he's not an idiot. He knows all about drugs and the president, and it's not like Jamestown or something where you have to pretend you don't know anybody here, or know anything that's going on. I've been here 15 years. I know all about the internet. I'm all over it. I'm a con man. Who wouldn't jump on that? So basically, I just come in, and in my head, this lady hired me. She's giving me some money to do some magic for her guests. You're one of her guests. Take a damn card. That's all in my head. But as I walk up to him, it's just this weird, crazy-looking guy in a 1910 outfit, and he's going, take a card.
So you do. Yeah, well, maybe it's just, maybe it's your patter that really gets me associated, because, there's always a little bit of buildup, whether it's your shell game patter, where you're talking about the history of, the shell game, which I really love, or you're talking about the, what do you call it? It's the little weights.
Oh, yeah. The scale weights.
Yeah.
It's passing the weights. That's a great story.
Yeah, it's a terrific story that goes along with it.
I studied a long time. I did a course, I taught a course at the Magic Castle for 20 years called School for Scoundrels, where I taught the history of three-card monte, the shell game, the endless chain, and all the other kind of gypsy, Romany, Eastern European scam games that came into Europe at the during the Spanish picaresque period. So I had to study them up through the 19th, 20th century, and we taught a course on the methods of those games and everything else, and the history. And I fell in love. That's one of the reasons I became Pop, was because I fell in love with that period and the con men of that period. Pop is a name chosen because of the way those guys worked. Whit Haydn was my performer's name before I became Pop Haydn, but Pop is a con man name. When the con men operated back in the turn of the century, they like to have avuncular names, like Pop or Dad Ryan, Pop Krieger, Uncle Willie in Chicago. These are, names that they chose for a couple of reasons. One thing is if somebody comes up to you and introduce you, this is Colonel Hayden, Colonel Whitney Hayden. And he said, "Oh, well, just call me Pop. Everybody else does." Now, when you shake his hand and call him Pop, he'll call you son. Now you're socially and in a power position one level down. Plus, you have expressed confidence in him, and since everybody calls him Pop, everybody loves him and trusts him, you must too. So you just walked right, just by calling him Pop, you walk right into his hands.
The indoctrination begins immediately, huh?
Yeah, that's it.
So, before you started the School for Scoundrels, which I found to be really interesting, were you already looking at the history of this, or did somebody approach you with the idea, let's do the School for Scoundrels, and then you started researching all the history?
Well, Mark Wilson, a very well known, very famous magician, used to do the Magic Land of Alakazam. He was in the board of directors of the Magic Castle, and he had asked me when they started a magic university there, they wanted to teach magic to magicians. You know, they had the top magicians lecturing and stuff, and he created the Magic University at the Magic Castle, and he asked me to do a course. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but about that time, Chef Anton, who is a pool expert, a trick shot expert, he asked me to help him put some magic into his trick shots. And so we were designing some of that, and he got really into it and wanted to do more magic. And I suggested that, you know, the shell game, Trick Armani, those kind of gambling games would go best on a pool table, you know, with the kind of stuff he was doing. And so he and I got into it. He asked me to show him something about the shell game, which I used to do on the streets in New York back in the 60s. But I had some original moves and done a lot of stuff with them, but I hadn't done it in years, and so I couldn't think of anything, couldn't remember it. And I think he was beginning to think I was full of crap. And then about a week later, I was moving a book, and a book fell off the top shelf and cracked open, and there was a stack of index cards, and they were like arrows and circles and stuff like football plays. And I was looking at them and going, what the? Oh, these are my notes on the shell game from 1968. And he opened that book. And so I called him, and we came over and started figuring out all these little moves and stuff. And he was going, this is great. This is really good. And he said, we should write a book. And about that time, I said, well, why don't we work together? We'll teach a course, and we'll put a book together for the course. And so Mark Wilson had us start this course in 94, I guess it was 1994. And we taught for 20 years. And it kept getting bigger, and more people came from all over the country, all out of the country to come.
I believe it. I saw you have a shell game video that I think you put up about a year ago, and it is a dangerous angle that you have the camera placed, because it's behind your left shoulder looking into the field. And I mean, if you're going to be able to catch anybody with a slip, that's right where it's going to be. And yet everything is flawless. I even slowed it down and went frame by frame, and it was just so smooth and so invisible. I can definitely see why you were teaching it.
But for a living, you get pretty good at it because you have to. It's like practice with a gun to your head.
Absolutely. I totally get it. But I'm assuming you've put, I don't know, how much would you practice something like that before you'd actually start doing it for folks? Is that something that you'd put maybe 6 weeks into, or a year into, or?
Most of my tricks take at least 3 years before I start doing them in public. Some of them will take 15, 20 years. You know, the card tricks especially. Some of the card tricks I do have taken me, you know, most of my life to learn. I'm still learning. Some mechanical tricks, it depends on the level of skill you have already and the level of skill that's required, you know. But practice isn't difficult for me. I love to practice. You know, to me, practice is most of the reason I do this. I'm obsessive compulsive, and repetitive action is very soothing to me. So I'm happiest. I could sit in a doctor's office for hours. It wouldn't bother me. I'd just sit there, fiddle with a coin or pack of cards and just wait, you know.
Let's see. Something else I noticed is you are. I'm wondering if it's even visible to you now, just how smooth your actions are. So I love watching you palm cards. That's one of my favorite things that you do.
You're not
is palm
supposed to see that.
Well, that's just it. I don't see it, but you know what I mean. Like just once you've seen behind, I guess, the kimono enough, you kind of know what you're looking for. But it's so smooth, and the way you work it into your routines and your misdirection is just so. You have this way of like bugging your eyes out at people that it just pulls attention in, and you're just moving constantly.
That's exactly what it's for. Oh, what? Weird. The other thing is, I believe there needs to be a lot more emotion in magic than usual. And a lot of magicians, they want to tell some sad story in order to evoke an emotion or play some sad music or something like that. That's not my idea about it. I feel like the magician should be having emotions. That's what makes him interesting. So I try and get mad, be frustrated, be devious, you know, as many different things as I can, you know, startle, you know. That's what makes the character interesting. He's going through the idea to me is like magic is not like a theater. Magic is a special kind of theater in which the audience are participants. They're not just sitting in the back watching. They're participants. They're supposed to be witnesses. A magic show is more like a strongman show or a doctor's surgical exhibition demonstration. You know, he's demonstrating something, and the audience is supposed to be there learning and watching. You know, they have a story to tell. It will be the story of what they went and witnessed, not the story about Peter Pan. I saw this guy and he did this. So that makes it different. Now, the magician kind of gets people into the mood by playing the character and setting up a story and getting things in, and he gets them involved. And they think we're all going to just suspend disbelief and have a fun time with old Pop, who's pretending to be a magician. And then everything goes along just like they think. They're playing, we're having fun, we're pretending, we're doing a scene. And suddenly, they're left with an anvil and nothing underneath them. You know, the magic happens. Now it's not funny anymore. It's not just a play. It's like, wait a minute. He really did go back into the past. He really did make something appear. He really, you know, that confuses them. And now they kind of get mixed, their imagination, their imaginative story, and their real experience. And it's hard for them to determine which is real and which is imaginary. And it gets fussed together, and especially in their memory later. They'll remember the most impossible version of the trick you ever heard, and they'll swear to it. Fantasy with the reality.
Unreliable witnesses. You do bring a sense of whimsy. So a lot of magicians I see today, you're right, they try and be very dramatic, very serious. And I like it when you're poking fun of the audience, you're poking fun of yourself, and you're just there to have a good time. And yeah, you play it fast and loose, and then all of a sudden there's this reveal, and then a reveal on top of that, and it really takes people back. To me, that's more disarming and surprising than the other way around.
Well, there's some really great, you know, some really great, amazing magic tricks that you can do for people. You could do anything if you wanted to. Give it enough money and people, you could convince anybody of anything. You could, I mean, imagine a con game like the Sting, enlisting 30, 40 people just to fool somebody with a magic trick. It's happened. Yeah, a whole audience of people all in on it except for one guy. So yeah, that's magic is it could be dangerous. It could be too powerful. You know, and I think the real purpose of magic is for fun. It's meant to be a pleasant way of reminding people that they can be had. Eric Severide was a commentator on the television back in the late 60s, and he saw the Doug Henning do the magic show on Broadway in, I think it was 73. And he had a TV show where he was talking about it. He says, I saw this young man, Doug Henning, do the magic show on Broadway, and it was wonderful. I have no idea how he made the girl disappear or change places with him or float in the air, but it reminded me of something my father told me, which would have been probably from the turn of the century, from my period. So my father said, there's two kinds of people in this world. There's people that can be had, and there's suckers. And the only difference between them is a sucker is a special kind of person that'll bet you $50 he can't be had. And he said, and I think about that when I watched this young Henning fellow, Doug Henning. He said, I don't know how he did it, but it reminds me there is a reason, there is a way. And even if I can't figure it out, there is a way. It helps remind me not to be a sucker. Just because I can't figure it out, just because I can be had, doesn't mean I'm a sucker. Mm. And maybe magicians, that's their mission, is to be here to remind us that we can be had so we don't become suckers. That was kind of like a mission statement for me. I kind of like that way. I think in some societies, like in Indonesia, where black magic and superstition are very commonplace, the right kind of magic for that society would be more like Penn and Teller, more stuff that kids and makes fun of, the psychic healers and the fakes. Someone that wises people up to that, the Penn and Teller type. Whereas in a rigid materialistic society like the United States was, I think Uri Geller was a nice corrective. He pretended to be real, and he fooled an awful lot of people. And it made people think about the possibilities of extrasensory perception and other thing, and revitalize that whole discussion. And revitalize magic too, I think.
Very cool. So something I've noticed before is that some magic tricks or some sleights can be simple, and you can accomplish the exact same thing doing it in a very complicated manner. Or I've seen some people perform a sleight that on the surface, like, from my perspective looking at them, it doesn't look that difficult, but when you see behind the scenes, there is a lot of manipulation. Like, there's many steps to make that one simple sleight. So for you, what do you like better? A simple sleight that gets a really good reaction, or something that's difficult for you to perform, but maybe the audience isn't as wowed by it?
Well, I do a lot of both. Actually, what I like to practice is the stuff that's really, really hard. What I like to perform is the stuff that's more easy. So, yeah, I do the hard stuff when it's the best way to get to the goal. I'll take the easy route whenever I can if it doesn't lessen the effect or the power of the trick. But in practice, I would like to practice the hardest thing I can think of.
But it doesn't.
Practice some for 20 years now.
It's not more satisfying for you to pull off something that's difficult versus simple, as long as the reaction or it gets you to the right place. It's all the same to you.
The satisfaction is in the practicing. If the move becomes so good it's useful, I'll move and use it. And I'll use it because it's the best way. But I don't get particular satisfaction out of doing it the hard way. I just do it the best way. And it's easy. In performance, there's a lot more angles, a lot more pressure, and you have a lot more things that can go wrong. Your hands can get sweaty, all kinds of things. So I don't like to do much of anything when I'm performing unless it's rock solid. I can do under any circumstances and can't miss. Some of my stuff that I do like that is very hard, sleight of hand. Some of it is easier. To me, I just find the best method, and that includes how often I can do it. something that's the hardest method isn't necessarily the best method until I can do it just as well as I can do the easy method.
I think it's funny. You say hard or easy or simple, and I think that's all relative because the stuff you do that's a quote unquote simple maneuver, you do it so expertly that you're obviously at a level that somebody like me is never going to attain. It's just so smooth, so seamless. I think it's awesome.
I've had 50 years of experience on it too, in practice, to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so yeah, being old, and then of course, I probably don't have that many years left. I'm just now getting to the point where I can do some things, and who knows how my hands will be when I'm 80. I'm 72, so I'm looking at trying to get as much magic done and music done as I can. But I still got the hands.
Right, dexterity is still there. Something I was reading about a little bit in your bio was you talked about in kind of your early years, you picked up some mentors. And I was just curious how important you think the mentor process was for you in your development.
Oh, it was very important. Well, the main thing is seeing real pros, real artists at work changes the way you look at the art. I think a lot of magicians didn't have a lot of good models to go on. They don't quite know what magic is supposed to be, But I've sat and watched, experts like Eddie Fector, for hours, and I know exactly what he was about, what he did for people, and why it was fun. He was a bartender magician. He took working class people and blew them away. They loved him. He was a big, fat-fingered guy with tattoos up and down. He'd been a professional wrestler and a Navy guy, and he was just a working man kind of guy. But he had a sense of humor, and he loved magic, and he was the most incredible chops you've ever seen. He could do more with cards than anybody I've ever seen. He was just amazing, And so that gave me an edge because I know, he was not a fantasy character, although he himself was a character. All the guys I knew growing up were old guys, and they were characters. When I was 14, I wanted to be an old Jewish guy with a scotch in his hand and a pack of cards. Those are the guys that I had seen, I admired. They sat up all night talking about card tricks, smoking cigars, and drinking whiskey, and they'd let me sit and listen to them, and wow, that was great, And that's what I always wanted to be,
So was your, that seems interesting. Your minister father, was he okay at that age, sitting up with a bunch of guys drinking? And
okay at that age. He thought it was good for me because he knew these guys. They were friends of his.
Okay.
He went to college with a couple of them. He's the one that introduced me to them. They were, well, of course, in drinking in the Episcopal family isn't a problem. So wherever there's 4 Episcopalians, you always find a 5th. But no, it was just everything about it appealed to me, and I wanted to be one of them. And then I dropped out of college to face the draft in '68 and ended up in New York working at New York University Hospital. And then they fired me when I flunked the physical for the draft. And I was stuck on the streets of New York City and had to make a living somehow. So I started doing card tricks and stuff on the street, and that's how it developed into a career.
What was it like back then on the streets of New York doing card tricks?
It was the greatest time of my life.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The 60s, late 60s in New York City. There's the anti-war movement, the Black Panthers. There's so much excitement going on, and hippies, and it was an extraordinary time, and really good time to be a young man. And I'm glad I survived it.
Did you meet a lot of interesting people?
Oh boy, yeah, a lot of every kind of people. Well, I was living practically off the streets, in New York City. And so I met a lot of criminals and dangerous people, as well as, I worked for Dorothy Day at the Catholic Worker and met her. She was a bit up for sainthood now. Back then, she was considered a dangerous radical. So I've been influenced by an awful lot of different kinds of people, and a lot of it happened in that 3 or 4 year period.
Was that pretty big culture shock, you going from kind of Tennessee, North Carolina, up to New York City all of a sudden?
Oh, yeah. It was a huge culture shock. First day I get off out of the Grand Station, I'm walking down with my suitcase. The friendly guy offers to help carry my suitcase. Where are you going? I'll help you. Well, he was going to take him. I almost let him do it, and then I realized what was going on. But, and it was like that ever since. People broke into my apartment, and I got robbed in my supervisor's apartment. All kinds of, it was quite a period. But the other thing was, I found out that this magic thing was great. It was a magic carpet. If I wanted a record album, I would stand in front of the store and do card tricks until I had enough money to go in and buy the album. If I wanted something to eat, I would stand outside the restaurant, do magic, and go in and get something to eat. I could get money whenever I needed it, at a moment's notice. And it was like, this was great, So that was pretty much how I got started as a professional magician. I was spoiled from the get-go.
Did you ever use it to meet specific people? You see an interesting looking woman over there and go and use it to open the conversation?
No, not really. What would happen is I'm a very, very shy person. I'm still very shy. I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere. Very high functioning, but on the spectrum. I'm especially when I was younger, it was difficult for me to talk to people, especially girls. I found that I could do magic, and the girls would come to me. And the magic wasn't that it entranced them. It just gave them an occasion to break the ice. That was wonderful. Gee, how do you do that? Have you done it? They say something, and then I'm into. I can talk to them and do magic for them or anything else. But the magic allowed them to have an occasion to come to me.
That's interesting. I like that.
I have a friend of mine, a very dear friend, who is a great juggler, a magnificent juggler. And she says that she took up juggling so that boys would like her. And she said it because at least it gives them something to say to her. And I think she was basically saying the same thing. It gave the boys an occasion to hit on her.
Yeah, I was very socially awkward, very shy, a lot of social anxiety, all the greatest hits growing up. And I've since kind of come out of that, but there were a lot of specific things that sort of helped me. And at one point, we were doing whatever we could to make ends meet. I've never had less than 2 jobs at any one point in time. I've always been doing multiple things. One of them was wedding photography. And it's very incongruous to what I do in my daily life. I've always been like in IT, computer stuff, and so it's such a different animal. But I found that when I had this camera and I was at a wedding, suddenly I was like Superman wearing his cape. Like anywhere I went, it didn't matter who these people were. I was somebody that they wanted to interact with, somebody they wanted to talk to. I was immediately ingratiated. Some of the families, 15 years ago that I took pictures of, I still go and eat with like their parents. It's like it somehow gave me this excuse to become part of their family. And I've always thought, I don't think I would be quite the person I am today if I hadn't had that conduit to help me connect with people and interact with people, and do things like that. And so the idea that magic has done that for you for 50 years, that's pretty awesome that it's still stuck with you and helping you along the way.
Well, it's also, I don't know any other way to make a living. That's all I've ever done. I studied for the Episcopal ministry. I have a degree in philosophy. Uh, Not a lot to fall back on.
Well, if you were in seminary, what was the turning point? What made you decide to move away from that and towards magic?
Well, I was in my last year of seminary and working in the churches. I loved everything about seminary. My degree was in philosophy in undergraduate, so this graduate degree in theology was very interesting. I loved Greek and Hebrew studies, and I loved the history, and I loved the Bible studies, and then preaching. Everything about it. I liked all that. And then I got actually working in a church, and I found out a lot of things that the church is actually run by the altar guild. Several old ladies that bring the flowers in and all this stuff. Nothing changes. You can't get past over there. They weigh down all the votes and everything. Pretty soon I was finding, it's like having 300 bosses working in a church. You don't get to really make all the changes and stuff that you've been excited about doing for the church. And I was beginning to feel different about it. And I talked to my bishop in Virginia, and he said, well, if you can do anything except the ministry and still be happy, you ought to do that. And that was a revelation to me. And I decided, no, I would really be happier doing magic. And it all came together. I was doing a faculty party, a faculty student party at the seminary, and I was doing magic tricks for everybody. And this old professor, Reginald Fuller, Dr. Fuller came over. He was a little bird-like English guy, and he taps me on the shoulder. He says, Whitney, may I talk to you a minute? And I said, sure, Professor, what is it? He said, when you do those magic tricks, you light up like a firecracker. It's wonderful to watch. Have you ever thought of doing that for a living? And I said, well, I have done it for a living, Professor, and I love it. But I want to do something relevant. And he goes, well, it's not as if God needs you. The good Lord is perfectly capable of saving the world all by himself. Doesn't need your assistance. Gives you a love for something that is his greatest gift. That is what you should follow. If he wants you to become a martyr or a saint, he'll call you, and you will want to go. Until then, you should follow the love that he's given for you. I was out of school 2 weeks later. I was on the streets doing magic again.
Wow. Do you think if it wasn't for that conversation right there, do you think you would have stuck with it and stayed in the seminary?
No, I mean, there was no sticking with it. I mean, I could have finished easily. I was only a few months away from graduating. But it was just not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to teach either. I mean, the other thing, if you're not going to be running a church, you could go to seminary and be an academic and teaching theology or Hebrew or whatever. But I didn't really want to do that either. That's the same thing over and over again. Preparing lessons, and it's not allowing me to follow what I really like, and it doesn't exercise my need for repetitive action. So, no, I've never regretted. I think it was exactly the right thing. I think that Dr. Reginald Fuller was very wise and knew it was the right thing.
Do you think that just kind of galvanized you?
Yeah, it just kind of galvanized. And I feel like single-handedly I saved the Episcopal Church. by moving away from it? I didn't leave the church. I just left the ministry.
Hilarious. Well, this all started when we were talking about you having mentors, and that was very paramount for you. Have you had the opportunity to do the opposite? Have you mentored anybody else?
I've had several students have become full-time professional musicians.
What was that like? You said you didn't necessarily want to teach, but to me,
No,
mentor is something of a teacher.
well, it's a teacher. I don't mind teaching one-on-one, but and I don't mind teaching a lecture every now and then or something like that. But I just don't like the regular everyday thing. I like my time is my most valued thing. I like to have time to myself to do whatever I want to do. I don't like people. I don't like people taking away my time to do things I don't want to do. I'm a very stubborn, spoiled guy. I have a very tolerant and wonderful wife, and she allows me to do all the things that I want to do.
So, what are some of the highlights? Did you have anything on your bucket list that you wanted to get done? Any white whales that you conquered?
Oh, well, I'm still working on my show. I'm putting together a theater show. We've done it several times. I keep working on it. Eventually, I want to have a 2-hour full theatrical presentation with ragtime music and magic, which we've been working on. And I'm just learning music. I'm learning to play with the ragtime band with the with the washboard and machine. It's one of those kind of Spike Jones horns and blocks and cowbells machine on the empty crate. That and the washboard is going to be my contribution to the music of the show.
Well, what made you decide to play in the band there as opposed to just have them present?
Well, we need to get the band to look more like a team with the show, and I wanted to add a female singer, and it's just that the music is has always been an important part of the show. It's changed. Originally, we had stride piano with Dave Bourne and his band that I worked with, and we was more like saloon music from the 1870s and 80s. But when Dave passed away, my new band leader came in doing the same stuff, but then I found out he's really, really into ragtime and the music of 1910, which is more of the period. Pop left in 1910, so it's more my period. So we decided to get more into ragtime. And at first I was just going to do the bones, with the band or something like that. And then I got into it. And next thing I knew, I was building a board and a washboard and this incredible machine over here.
You say washboard. Are you doing it the style where you wear it on your chest kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wait, I can't see. Oh, it's got that thing on. I can't. But anyway, yeah, it's a washboard. It hangs from my neck like this, and there's a peach crate on my side. It has a piece of copper on the back and a drum pedal for a bass drum, and then it has a rod going up with cymbals and blocks and cowbells and stuff and horns that I can play along with the band.
That's awesome. What's your next production?
We don't know yet. It's going to probably be this summer. We're waiting for the COVID things to clear. We don't want to do a theatrical production yet. But as soon as between now and then, I'm going to be trying to learn to play this stuff. At least well enough not to embarrass the band, And I'm looking forward to it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, with your propensity for practice, I'm sure it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
Goodness. So
it's my wife not killing me is the problem, I'm sure no jury would ever convict her.
So one of the things I assume a lot of magicians aspire to is to make their way to the Magic Castle eventually over there in LA, which is a a very special place. I would almost say magical place, but it's in the title. It's a very select place where magicians can go and perform, and it's invite only. I think you can't. Nobody can just walk up off the street and go in there. You have to kind of know somebody. Yeah, and so I mean, you've been there enough to where I think you're just part of the furniture. So I think a lot of people would be pretty jealous. So tell me about that.
I feel pretty blessed to have had the Magic Castle. I moved here in '76, and I've been a part of the Magic Castle ever since. And had great friends and mentors there. And I've been a 7-time award winner there, and I was vice president for 4 years. So it's been a home to me. I love it. I was just there last week for a week, and I'll be there again in March for a week.
What's the feeling when you walk into that place? Is it just, I'm home, I'm comfortable?
Yeah, it's home, it's comfort. If you sit there long enough, you see everybody in magic. They come, they come through LA on their way to the Orient or Hawaii or the East Coast. So everybody stops there, and you really do get to see old friends an awful lot there.
That's cool. So it's legitimately a place where magicians can go and smoke cigars and drink and
don't smoke cigars. Not anymore. We used to be wide open for cigars and cigarettes, but with the laws that changed, we have a smoking area outside. Is the best we can do.
Well, have you realized the dreams of your 14-year-old self there, where you're sitting around with a bunch of older magicians and just swapping stories?
One of my good friends is Mark Wilson, who was on TV when I was 14, Magic Land of Alakazam. How could it get better than that? I've met so many celebrities, members of the Magic Castle are, just rife. Buddy Epstein, I knew him really well. Beverly Hillbillies, I watched when I was a kid. Just one after Get Smart, Don Adams, I met him there. It was just, almost everybody. I've met almost everybody in the Hillbillies. I met Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca and all those people. Everybody I saw on TV when I was a kid, I met just about in real life.
Were you starstruck?
I don't get starstruck usually for people. I mean, I'm excited to see them. I'm not starstruck. There's only a few people that kind of, Bob Dylan, I would be starstruck, a few others, but, there are not too many that have meant that much to me personally. They would, make me starstruck. I'm excited and admire them. But like Dylan, I would be a stupid guy talking to him.
I've thought that before too. It's like, would I actually be starstruck to meet anybody? And I'm not sure who that would be. Like, I think it would surprise me if it actually happened. So I think you'd be you're too cool and calm and collected. I can't see you getting starstruck over anybody.
That's affectation. That's the character.
Well, you live in LA. You do a lot at the Magic Castle. I'm assuming Vegas has been part of your life as well, right? Mm-hmm. Is it still? Do you still head over there occasionally?
I haven't in a long time. I try to avoid traveling as much as I can. But I don't really do the cruise ships anymore. I worked at Caesar's Tahoe in Reno with Tom Sony, the great Tom Sony, and I worked at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas when they opened the Magic place there. They had a huge Magic section that only lasted for a year or two and then went out. It was supposed to be a Magic Castle type place. So I was there for a while. Vegas is hot. It's so hot. I like it here in LA. It's nice all the time. It's 70 degrees here now.
Yeah, you guys are definitely spoiled over there.
I'm ruined completely.
I'm sure, especially from growing up in Tennessee, and I mean, I was in Memphis, so I wasn't as far
Carolina,
north, and it was just cold and miserable.
Eastern North Carolina was so hot and humid in the summer, and there was no air conditioning back then. You
Mm.
got to remember, it was like hot inside as well as outside back then, just fans, you know. So it was pretty miserable, and it's mosquitoes, huge, powerful mosquitoes that would carry you away. I swore when I was a kid I would not be in the South, you know, when I grew up because of the heat and the feds. I liked it, you know, otherwise. And
Mm.
the food, like I said, the barbecue is terrific.
Excellent. Well, right here at the end, I was just curious if folks out on the internet, because I mean you're all over the internet, if you wanted to interact with you in a very specific way, how would you have them do that?
Oh, well, they can come to my website, pophayden.com. It's spelled just like Haydn. If you ever need to find me, just Google Pop Haydn. I'm all over. You'll find all my videos, all my websites, and everything. But it's pophayden.com, and YouTube is just YouTube/Pop Haydn, and that'll get you all my videos and performances. I have every time I get a chance to record a performance, I put it up there. So there's lots of performances of the same thing over and over, different audiences, different situations. It's a lot of fun. You can spend a lot of time watching how I sweat through different audiences.
Well, you also have popsmagic.com, which you sell a lot of your tutorials, like on the shell game, or
Yeah.
was it the Chicago Sunrise? I think is one of my favorite tricks of yours.
Surprise, yeah.
Surprise, there you go.
So for magicians, the popsmagic.com is where the magicians go. You can buy stuff. The popsmagic.com is where people that aren't interested in learning how to do magic would go to find out about pop and where I perform and see videos and stuff.
All right, cool.
Okay, cool.
Well, I appreciate your time, your energy, your enthusiasm.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Greg. I've enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and I'm gonna click stop on my recording stuff.